Today, let's see, we are on 36b. We're in the we just finished the Gemara about capers, caper husks, in Hebrew called kafrisen. And while we were learning this Gemara, we did have some interesting topics that came up. One of them was the laws of Tuma and Tahara, things that can purify or impure, things that are pure or become impure and can make other things impure. And we spoke about that it needs to have a size of an egg in order to make other things impure. The fruit itself. Now, the fruit itself has to be the size of an egg, but certain things can combine with the fruit itself. Like if it's a protector of the fruit, that also could combine with the fruit and make it sizable enough to be able to give off impurity to other items. So, for example, we spoke about the pitum of the pomegranate. That would be mitztaref. That would join together with the pomegranate to give it the size of an egg to make other things impure. And we said, but the nates, which is an outer part of the pomegranate, whether it means some type of a husk around the pomegranate, that we said would not combine. It's definitely not part of the fruit. It's not even a protector of the fruit because it's on top of the pitum. In other words, it's beyond it's more than one protector to the fruit, and therefore it wouldn't be considered the protector because the fruit has its own protector, and this would be an additional protector around the protector of the fruit. Again, the pitum would be the protection for the fruit, and then the nates would be the additional protection for the fruit, and therefore it said it doesn't combine regarding the laws of impurity. And then we mentioned that regarding the laws of Arla, we said an interesting statement that the shell, the husk of the pomegranate and the nates is chayev in Arla. They are considered, you have to keep the 3-year limit. They're all part of that rule. You have to keep the 3-year limit because the first 3 years you can't, the limitation of the first 3 years that you're not allowed to benefit from these items, because we are considering them part of the, not exactly part of the fruit, but included in the law of Arla, which means they are a protector of the fruit regarding the laws of Arla. And the Gemara used that to prove that even something that's not on the fruit, when the fruit is harvested, it still could be called a protector for the fruit while the fruit is attached to the tree. It does have things that are called protectors to the fruit. For example, the nates, this husk of the pomegranate. But when we mention that, we also mentioned something about egoism, which are walnuts, and the shell of the walnut, and the seeds of other fruits. You have to keep the laws of Arla. So I just want to spend a few minutes discussing the seeds of other fruits. And we mentioned here that you have to keep the laws of Arla because of the seeds of other fruits. Now, why are the seeds? Let's say, for example, let's just pick an example. You have an apple tree, okay? It's less than 3 years old. Would you be allowed to eat the apples? No. Can't eat the apples of a tree that's Arla, that's within the first 3 years. You can't. Can you eat the peel, the apple peel? No, I don't think so, because the apple peel, as far as I understand, is part of the fruit. It's not like maybe an orange peel would be different, because you don't really, that would be another story. We'll talk about that soon, orange peel. But let's say the apple peel, that's 100% the fruit. Everyone eats, when you eat an apple, I mean, it's normal to eat the apple peel, part of the fruit. That's for sure arla. You can't just say I'm peeling the apple peel off, I'm going to eat. No, that's prohibited. What about the apple seeds? Would you be allowed to eat the apple seed? Would someone be allowed to eat the apple seed? Well, that's arla. So this Mishnah that we brought in this previous Gemara, it mentioned that the apple seed is chayev in arla. It is obligated to keep the laws of arla. You would not be allowed to eat the apple seed. Now, I know you're all asking, why would anyone want to eat an apple seed? I mean, it's it's not the normal type of food that we serve people or we eat. And the truth is, it even has some type of a poisonous part of the apple seed has something called I think amalgam, something that's like a little poisonous. But the thing is, if you cook it, it actually is edible. And the same thing with other seeds, like cherry seeds as well. The cherry pit, inside the cherry pit, there is a seed. If you crack open the cherry pit, you have a seed inside. The same thing is with peaches. There's a seed inside the pit. And that seed, don't eat it. But if you cook it, then you could eat it. So these apple seeds, the cherry seeds, the peach seed, that's inside, the seeds that are inside the fruit, they are edible. And obviously, it's true. I don't think most of you are interested in eating them. But I guess in times of famine, in the olden days, they would eat these things. And so in any event, we want to know what the halacha is for two reasons. Number one is the laws of arla, and number two, the laws of blessings. What bracha would you recite on? So regarding the laws of arla, the Mishnah that we brought said, klipe egoizim v'hagarinim, the shell of the walnut. Obviously, we're talking about when the walnut is very young and the shell is edible. And the garinim, and the seeds of fruits. Chayavin ba'arla, it says you have to keep the laws of arla. You have to keep the laws of arla the first 3 years. You can't eat those seeds. You cook them, you can't eat them. Why not? Because they're arla. So the question is, if they're arla, would that mean that they are considered fruit? And you would be obligated to recite a bracha bayrei pri ha'etz on these seeds. Yes, Ben, you had a question. Ben?
Yeah, no, I wanted to say some of the seeds, if you crack them open, they have arsenic in them. The heart of the seed has arsenic, which is a real poison. If you eat too much of it, it'll kill you.
Well, I think the word is amygdalin. Amygdalin is the poison that these seeds have. But that's only if you don't cook it. If you cook it, it's fine. Right. So we're talking about if you cooked it. We're not talking about if you didn't cook it.
Okay.
So if you cooked it, it's it's like the acai tree, no? The acai is a tree that if you eat the fruit, it's poisonous. But if you cook it, right? But you gotta cook it first. If you don't cook it, it's poisonous. Yeah, it's like you gotta call your friend to say, make sure that call me in a few minutes. I'm gonna be eating this. But anyway, so the thing is that that these seeds, what bracha would you recite? So the bracha on seeds would seemingly be bayrei pri ha'etz on these seeds. Why? Because if we're saying that it's fruit and you have to keep the laws of arla, that would seem like it's fruit and you have to call it a fruit of a tree. In other words, if we're claiming that you keep Arla, that means that we're saying it's a fruit. And if it's a fruit regarding Arla, then it's a fruit regarding the laws of blessings. So you would have to recite the blessing on Bayrei Priya Eitz on these seeds because it's considered a fruit if it's obligated in Arla. There is one exception that some things are obligated in Arla and might not be considered fruits, and that would be, for example, protectors of the fruit. The protector of the fruit, we said, is included in the laws of Arla. So if you have something that's considered a protector of a fruit, you would be obligated to keep the laws of Arla for those items. Like, for example, we said around a date palm, around the dates, there's some type of a husk, and it's called, you have to keep the laws of Arla. And the reason is because it's considered a protector of the fruit. So the point is that there are cases where something could be a protector of a fruit, but it's not considered the fruit itself, and you have to keep the laws of Arla. But the question would be, what would be the law of blessings? What bracha would you recite on those items? So again, we're talking about two things now. The laws of the blessing on seeds, and that we said, well, seeds would seemingly be included in the blessing Bayrei Priya Eitz because the seeds are part of the fruit. The seeds are part of the fruit because we're saying you have to keep the laws of Arla. Protectors are a different story. Protectors have a special word that teaches you have to keep Arla for the protector of the fruit. Doesn't mean that it's the fruit itself. It's a protector of the fruit. You have to keep Arla. So if it's not the fruit itself, then the protector, you could say, well, that I don't have to recite a Bayrei Priya Eitz on the protector. It's included in the laws of Arla because there's a special teaching that says that something that's protector of a fruit, you have to keep Arla for it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's considered part of the fruit. So again, what we're coming to, the point that we're emphasizing here is that there may be a difference between something that's actual laws of Arla that fits within the category of Arla, the regular category. Fruits fit within the regular category of Arla. And on those items, you would recite the blessing who creates the fruit of the tree. And then we have other items that fall into the laws of Arla, but they don't exactly fit in. It's an extra teaching that says, you know what, you also keep the laws of Arla for protector of the fruit, some type of husks and things that are protectors of the fruit, that you would have to keep the laws of Arla as well for, but it doesn't mean necessarily that it's part of the fruit. And therefore, regarding the bracha, maybe you would recite a different bracha on those items, on those husks that are not part of the fruit, but they fall into the category, the laws of Arla. So what I'd like to do is show you the top Teves over here, which is on page 36b, the top Teves, and then we'll answer some questions. The top Teves mentions this statement that the Gemara said, that the shells of the walnuts and the seeds of fruits are obligated in Arla. And the reason is the peirin in them. Why are they obligated in Arla? Because they are actual fruits. Seeds are actual fruits, and therefore you would recite the same bracha on the fruits as you would recite on the seeds. Again, we're talking about like apple seeds or the seeds of a cherry. The peirin, they're fruits. Mikan, from here, sheyesh levarech, there's reason to recite a bracha al hagarinim shall good daniyos, that you would recite the bracha on the seeds of cherries, Vigarine afraskin and peaches, Veshel tapuchem and apples. V'chol mine garinim shall peiros, and all types of seeds of fruits. Bayrei Priya Eitz, the blessing who creates the fruits of the tree, because what we're saying is they fall into the laws of Arla, therefore they're called a fruit. And if they called a fruit, then you got to recite the blessing, Bayrei Priya Eitz, who creates the fruit of the tree. Now, there is one opinion that argues on this Teves, and he says that actually, I shouldn't just say one. There are other views, and one of the opinions that argues on Teves says that the reason why seeds are obligated in Arla are because they are also a type of protection for the fruit. Because if you remove the seeds, the fruit will not last. The fruit will spoil, and the seed actually protects the fruit. The only example that I can think of is they tell you when you cut open a avocado, if you leave the pit with the avocado, it actually doesn't lose its color so much. And so I don't know if that would be similar to what this commentary mentions, but he says the reason why seeds you have to keep Arla, the laws of the first 3 years, is because the seeds protect the fruit from going bad. And they fall in, they're not considered fruits, the seeds, they're considered a protector of the fruit. And if they're a protector of the fruit, then there's reason to say the blessing on the seed is not the blessing of fruits, because it's never, no one ever claimed that it was a fruit. It's only a protector of a fruit. This is the opinion of the Rashba. And he says, therefore, the blessing on the seeds would not be the blessing of ha'etz. And let me pull up the Rashba over here. He says, first of all, he says these seeds are bitter, and you shouldn't recite a bracha at all on them. And people don't plant the tree for these fruits, for these seeds, excuse me. So he says, number one, it's not called a fruit. It's only chayav and arla, only obligated in arla, only because it's a protector of the fruit. And number two, they're very bitter, so you don't recite a bracha at all. And if you sweeten it through cooking, you would recite a bracha shehakol, recite the blessing, the general blessing that Hashem created everything with His word, and so that's the opinion of the Rashba. Again, the tree claims that people don't plant it for this purpose. Now, I don't know if maybe he lived in a different time, and maybe in his day people didn't eat those seeds. Maybe in the time of Teves, people ate it. So there could be possibly a difference of era when the people in the situation where they lived, and the suffering, the situation where they were. Did they need those fruits? Was that like that make it or break it for their life? So I'm not sure. It could be, but either way, there definitely is an argument here, because even if the Rashba would agree that people do eat those seeds, it would still not be considered really a fruit. It would only be considered a growth of the cherry tree, and as the Rashba clearly says, it's called a protector. It's a protector of the fruit. It's not the fruit itself. And therefore, even if he would agree to recite a bracha, he would not say a ha'etz, he would probably say ha'adama, it's a growth from the ground. Okay, so we have a few questions, and I see Avraham wants to ask something. So yeah, Avraham. You're muted.
I got it. Okay. The concept that the seeds are there to protect the fruit, doesn't make much sense because an apple, the seed's in the middle of the apple falls down, rots, which creates a compost for the seed to grow. You look at an apple, it's designed, for cooler climates. For hot climates, an orange has a lot of juice around it to protect the seed because it's going to dry out. So it doesn't make any sense because that's the principle. It's a compost.
So the way you see fruits is all fruits, their job is really to protect the seed, not that the seed protects the fruit, but the fruit protects the seed. That's very interesting.
So it can grow. I often thought of it for years, and I thought, what about an orange? I mean, an orange, the juice is in little sachets,
Right.
And it's there to protect that for the growth, so it can get a chance to grow in that liquid.
But let me, the fact is that the seeds are not like, with regard to people eating these fruits, the seeds are not the, primary reason why, even if they're going to eat the seed is not the primary reason of these fruits. The primary purpose of this tree and the fruits are the fruit itself. In addition, there's seeds. So the question would be, even if you want to say the way God created the tree, he created it in a way that the fruit protects the seed, which is, as you're saying, and it sounds very interesting. I never thought about it that way. Even so, what we're dealing with is not how Hashem created it, but how people are benefiting from it. And the benefiting that we have from it, it could be that the seed also has a positive effect on the fruit around it. And by the seed being there, it actually helps keep those fruits from decaying, from spoiling. I'm just throwing a thought because you do find that the seed from the pit of the avocado does help the fruit not lose its color.
The main purpose is the tree can survive.
Right, but you're saying you're saying the purpose why Hashem created the seeds there in the fruit is because the fruit or the reason why Hashem created the fruits is because to keep the seeds safe, which is fine, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's why people plant it. In other words, when people are cultivating and planting these, their orchards, they have a in mind for good fruits. That's what they want. So the question is, do the seeds help the fruit in any way? Like, I don't know, the watermelons that have seeds, are they sweeter than other watermelons? Maybe the seeds protect the sweetness or something. I'm just throwing thoughts out that it could be that it works both ways, that the fruit does protect the seed, but the seed also protects the fruit.
Yeah, because that's his life's food. That's his food. So it's got to protect it. It has, I never thought of that before, but you're saying that. Because it has to protect the fruit because the fruit is its daily bread, as it were.
Well, but that means logically it should protect it, but does it? That's the question. Logically, you're saying it would be nice for it to protect it, but in what sense does it protect it? That's really the question.
Right.
So it's a good question. Something to think about. Thank you, Avram. Very interesting.
Thanks.
I think we have a few of questions. I don't know who's first. The 347 number. Would you like to ask your question? Is that Shlomo Yosef? Who's the 347? Shlomo Yosef? Not sure. Okay. Let's go to Ben. Ben.
Yeah, I wanted to say the seeds and fruit have a relationship in more than one way. God created the fruit for us to eat, but also some of the fruit will protect the seeds and be food for the seed to grow. when the fruit rots. That's where it's going to start rooting, is with what the fruit will protect it or provide for it. So there is two reasons in the relationship between the fruit and the seed.
So
The
and what are
ones
those
that we eat, the fruit that we eat, are not going to help the seed. But
Right.
the fruit that we don't eat and falls down from the tree,
right? That helps.
That will create more plantings.
Okay, all right. Good point. Good point. Yes, Susan.
The laws of Orla is only on fruits,
Correct, not on vegetables. Yeah, and logically it has to be that way because vegetables plant and they last a year. Now, if you had to keep the laws of Orla, guess what? You would never be able to eat any vegetables. So, yeah, logically it can only be on fruit.
I have one more question.
Yes.
Is an eggplant a fruit or a vegetable?
A vegetable.
Okay.
Okay, Reb Shlomo
Rabbi?
Yosef. Yes, who's that? Phyllis?
Yes, I want to ask about tamarinds specifically, because they are not only delicious, of course, but they are beneficial medicinally. The fruit itself, which is tangy, it surrounds in the pod a bunch of very hard seeds. But if you cook these seeds sufficiently, which are almost like little rocks when you first take them out, they actually become soft enough to chew. They become chewy, and then they are supposed to have a beneficial effect on the pancreas. So I'm wondering about this relationship. I mean, it seems to me that the seed is a protector of the fruit, but at the same time, the fruit will enable, once the husk falls down, once it opens up, the fruit would enable the seed to sprout. But you do have to cook it in order to get the beneficial effect. So what bracha would you make on that seed? I mean, that would seem to be orla, but would you make that as pre ha'etz?
So again, Phyllis, it sounds like that would be very similar. Does it taste good, or is there no taste, just medicine benefit? Is there a good taste?
It doesn't taste like the fruit, but it's got a chewy consistency, and you can have it in the.
I want to know what it tastes like. Does it taste good, or it doesn't have any flavor?
It has a flavor.
It has.
You can actually make a drink out of it.
The seeds, okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you would recite, according to Teves, you would recite a Bari Pri Ha'etz because it's considered, the seeds would be considered part of the fruit. And according to the Rashba, the seeds would not be considered part of the fruit because unless you would say that people, this is a unique fruit that people specifically eat. Everyone eats these seeds. But I'm guessing that it's only like certain individuals that care about the health benefits from the seeds are probably going to cook those seeds. I don't know that everyone does that. So assuming that, I would definitely think the Rashba would argue and say either Ha'adama or Shahaka. But definitely not.
The juice was wonderful, but I wasn't aware that it was the seeds that made it. I thought it was the fruit. Ezra knows more.
So so what does that mean? Do they boil the seed in water and make juice, or they squeeze the seed and get juice? How do you get what is the juice? You mean they squeeze it?
I think Ezra probably knows that better than I do.
No, I really don't. I think that from the entire tamarind you can get tamarind like a tamarind juice that they probably add a little bit of sugar to it in order to give it a little bit more of a taste. But
So you're not talking about specifically the seeds. You're talking about the whole fruit. Ezra?
The whole fruit. I think the
Right.
tamarind, the
Right.
seed as well has something to do with it.
Something.
But,
So
I've drunk it. It's very good.
right. No, but the question really would be if the seed really has its own flavor. Is it just sugar? Is the seed only taste good because of the sugar part? I know the fruit sounds to me like I'm not familiar with the fruit, but it sounds to me like the fruit itself has a good flavor. But I don't know about the seed, and it could be that you're only sweetening it only because of the sweet.
In the soup, it tastes good. In the soup, it tastes good. If you cook it long enough.
Cook it in a soup, just the seed without the fruit, just the seed, and actually it has a good taste. So anyway, yeah, it would seem to me like it would be an argument between these opinions here, and the best would be to, of course, to recite a something else that has those brachas. And if you don't have anything else, then you would recite either shahakal or hadama, dependent on if it actually has, if we can assume that it has a good flavor. See, the Rajba said it would be shahakal if it doesn't, if you're sweetening it to make it a good flavor. But if you don't need to sweeten it to make it a good flavor, it would probably be hadama.
If it's in a soup, it's not the main.
It's probably not the main
ingredients
thing.
in the soup.
Right. You're probably right. Okay,
But
that's true. You're probably right, Ben.
I think Ben would probably know it. They make from the tamarind. They make something that in Israel that they call leder, that you can get in the shuk. It's a
I
flat.
never used it.
You never used it, but you eat them. You can actually cut pieces out of it and eat them, and they're very, very good.
You know what? I'm looking at the Rajba again. I should. It seems to me that the Rajba would hold if you need fire to cook it, if you sweeten it because you cook it with fire, so even without any sugar or additives, that itself means that you had to change it somewhat. And he says shahakal, the bracha would be shahakal. So what it sounds like is that if you need to cook it and it itself isn't tasty and it's not norm for people to eat it, the Rajba would hold that that it would be shahakal. Okay, so that's what it seems like. So it would be an argument between the Rajba and Teves. Okay, let's continue. The next Gemara is,
Rabbi.
Yes.
You were mentioning before about a Magdalene. In the 1970s and in the 1980s, there was a very, very big push for a Magdalene to be used as a medicine. It was extracted from peaches, and they made a medication called Laetrile, which they were touting its use as a cure for Yenamachla. So this was a very big thing for about 25 years in the mid 70s and 80s and even into the 90s. They had clinics in Mexico, and people were flying in from the United States to get this treatment in Mexico because it had been banned by the FDA in the United States, this Laetrile, which was taken from a Magdalene, taken from peach pits.
Interesting.
My cousin flew to
Mexico also.
for treatment, and
Your
it
cousin
didn't help him. It made him worse. But those clinics, that's why in the United States they don't do it.
What did you say, Phyllis?
I said that apricots were used for this. The seeds of them, not the fruit itself, but the seeds were used to extract Laetrile.
Right. Anyway, in any event, if you cook it, supposedly it doesn't have that deadly compound. Okay, so we're going to continue with the next Gemara. The next Gemara is going to talk about peppercorns. And it would be great if any of you know how peppercorns grow, because I don't. Is there anyone here that has seen peppercorn tree or peppercorn, the round peppercorns? Anyone know how they look? Okay.
They look like little seeds.
Little seeds.
Little brown, round, little apples, let's say, tiny, like an eighth of an inch each.
But where do they grow?
Edith will show you here a picture. Put it closer.
You can find them.
So would you think that's the fruit of the tree, of the peppercorn tree? Is that like the fruit?
Yeah,
It's on a sort of like a,
Uh-huh. Wow.
yeah, I love it because when I make soup, I break off a piece of it. And
Uh-huh.
this way I don't have all the peppercorns floating and it's easy to remove it
Right.
later.
Wow. Uh-huh. Okay. Do you ever eat the peppercorn straight? Just eat a piece of
You
peppercorn?
can, but I don't because it
Right.
bothers me.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay, so that's great. Look at that. We have peppercorn right here. Thank you, Edith.
I haven't ever
Skillfully.
found them.
What is that?
I haven't ever found them again.
she found them once, she never found them again.
Uh-huh.
Like in that form, as
Right.
opposed to individually loose.
Uh-huh. Oh, wow. Okay. So Pilpuli, peppercorns, we're on 36b. We're about, I don't know, maybe 17, 18 lines up from the bottom. Pilpuli, Rav Sheshes Amar Shahakol. Rav Sheshes says, if you eat peppercorns, you recite the bracha Shahakol. Rava Amar Loiklum. Rava says, no, you do not recite a bracha on peppercorns. Now, you have to keep in mind, we're not talking about peppers. That's number one. We're talking about peppercorns. And number two, we're talking about peppercorns. Keep in mind that peppercorns are really meant for spice. And they dry it out. And then when it's dried out, they grind it, make pepper. They make the spice black pepper, white pepper, whatever. They make the spice out of it. So here, what we're talking about is dried out peppercorns. So they're dried out already. And Rav Sheshes says you recite a shahakol, but Rava says, loy klum, you don't recite any bracha at all. And the logic is that it's really not meant to be eaten like this, meant to be a spice in other foods. And therefore, he says that it's not really it's not the norm to eat it at all, and it would not have a bracha. Now, if it was fresh, if they were fresh, then it would. Then he wouldn't say this. He's only saying no bracha because they're not. It's like eating something that's not edible. It's not really meant to be eaten. Yes, Susan.
So you're saying that once you change something, if it's fresh and then you dry it out, it no longer needs a blessing?
No, we didn't say that. We said that peppercorns that are meant to be used for spice, and they're meant to be part of another food. They're meant to be used as part of a soup and part of other salads and other foods. They're meant to be a small,
An addition.
An addition for other foods, and it's not meant to be eaten. Something is not meant to be eaten, you don't say a bracha. So it would be similar to eating sand. If you go to the beach and eat some sand, you would not recite a bracha on the sand.
I like pepper on popcorn.
Yes. So, but don't recite the bracha on the pepper, you recite the bracha on the popcorn. Okay. The popcorn is a bayre pri ha'adama.
Right.
You recite the bracha on the popcorn, it would include the pepper. It would include the pepper. If you eat soup, it include the bracha on the soup, would include the pepper. Whatever you have salad, it includes the pepper. Now, but you don't just eat straight peppercorns that are dried out.
But in Steinsaltz, it says that dried ginger is exempt from a blessing.
Okay, you're jumping ahead.
But I don't understand.
Let's get to ginger.
Is dried out and used, and you don't have a bless, or you do have a. Which is it? You do or you don't have a blessing? If you're going to use pepper in something, you included in whatever it is. It's like an addition, correct? You don't just eat pepper. But it's all right. But you've changed it. You've dried it.
Okay, just stay tuned, Susan. You gotta stay tuned.
All right.
So we're gonna come to this. 1 second. So we're talking about the peppercorns. Rav Shesha says you say shahako. Rava says you don't say any bracha. V'azda Rava l'taimei, and Rava goes along with his reasoning regarding the laws of Yom Kippur. The Amar Rava, because Rava says, "Kos pilpuli, if a person chewed pepper, v'yoimai de kippuri." Now, it uses the word chewed because things that are not normally eaten, the Gemara's term for eating those things, you call it chewed. It's a term. It really means he ate it, but he chewed it. When it's not the norm, he ate it in not the norm way. So the Gemara's term would be kus, which literally means chewed. So a person who ate pilpuli, this pepper, b'yoyma de kippuri on Yom Kippur, patur, he's exempt. He's exempt from the sin of eating on Yom Kippur. What is the punishment for eating on Yom Kippur? Kares, being cut off. And the death penalty for eating on Yom Kippur. And if a person ate peppercorns that are dried, which we'll soon see that it's talking about they're dried, the Gemara at this point doesn't know that they're dried, but the Gemara realizes that it's not a normal food to eat. So it is patur, the person is exempt from having that punishment of being cut off. And now we jump to Susan's case. Ginger. If a person chews ginger on Yom Kippur, what would be the law? You eat ginger on Yom Kippur. The law is you are patur, exempt. And we'll soon see that we're talking about dried. We're not talking about fresh. We're going to soon see later that this is specifically talking about dried. And if a person were to do this, they would be exempt from the punishment of on Yom Kippur. Now, I don't advise it for anyone to do this, even though you might be exempt from the punishment. Doesn't mean a person should do it or could do it. It just means that the biblical prohibition with the punishment, you wouldn't get that punishment for eating these things that are not so edible. The Gemara now asks a contradiction. Mesave. The Gemara says that the yeshiva asked a question on what we said earlier, that Rava and Rav Sheshes spoke about a case of pilpuli, of peppercorns. And now the Gemara asks a contradiction from a brisa. Haya Reb Meir Reimer. Reb Meir used to say, "Mi mashma shene'emar va'araltem or losai espiria." It seems from the verse that talks about the laws of Arla, and the verse states that you should leave those fruits of the 3 years. And the interesting thing is that it says of the fruit trees, leave the fruits for 3 years of the fruit trees. Why does it have to say of the fruit trees? If they're not fruit trees, they don't have fruits. You can't leave the fruits of a non-fruit tree. It could only be talking about fruit trees that it would say leave the fruits. And it's surprising that it adds the words, leave the fruits of the fruit trees. You'll plant the fruit trees and leave the fruits of them. Why does it have to tell you you're planting fruit trees and you should leave the fruits of them? Well, let it just say you planted trees. Obviously, they're fruit trees because you can't leave the fruits of a non-fruit tree. So it says, why does it say va'araltem or lasai? Why does it say Eitz Michael? It says Eitz Michael. So the verse says va'araltem or lasai aspirioi. You leave the fruits. Eini yoidea she'etz Michael. Don't I know that it's a fruit tree? She'etz Michael. Ela ma Talmud loymar. Rather, what is the verse trying to say? That when it says Eitz Michael, when it says the words a fruit tree, what is it trying to say? Lahavi eitz shetam eitzai uperyai shava. To include a tree that the taste of its wood and its fruit is equal. This refers to pilpulin. This teaches you that pilpulin are obligated in arla. And what it teaches you is that pilpulin are called a fruit tree, and it would basically have the laws of arla that the first 3 years you're not allowed to eat the peppercorns from this fruit tree. And why? How do we know it's called a fruit tree? Called a fruit tree because the verse includes a tree that has the bark is similar tasting or as the fruit itself. And so I wonder, Edith, if you ate some of the stem, I wonder if does it mean the stem or it means the bark of the actual tree? But it looks like you have a stem there with the peppercorns.
Yes.
I wonder if the stem itself tastes like the peppercorn. That's an interesting.
Didn't try it.
Can you give me a piece to try?
I try it now?
So,
No, I don't.
in any event, the Gemara says that the tree of the peppercorn, it tastes like the peppercorn itself, and therefore it's included in the laws of arla. It's called a fruit tree. In other words, the verse adds an extra word to teach us that it's called a fruit tree. Yes.
The stem tastes like wood.
Tastes like wood. So maybe it means the bark. Maybe the bark of the tree. Maybe the trunk. Maybe
in October.
Rebbe?
Yeah, let me just mute everyone. 1 second. I got to mute everyone and unmute yourself, Isaac. Isaac, you want?
I thought that the fruits used to taste like, or the barks used to taste like the fruits. But the only tree that is left that does that is the esrog. I thought that part of the curse was it used to be that the fruits tasted, the bark was like the same as the eights. But afterwards, I don't remember the exact medrash, but afterwards only the esrog tastes like the fruit itself. Whatever.
Right. No, what you're remembering is in the beginning of creation. So it says eitz pri oisa pri laminai. So it says that the tree itself, Hashem commanded the trees
to taste like the fruit.
To taste like the fruit itself, but they didn't listen. And
Isaac, can you turn down the background noise? So what you're saying is it's surprising that there is that we don't know about this this pilpuli tree, which seems like it's also because what you're mentioning the esrog tree. It does say that the esrog tree was unique. That Tam Eitza Yapiriyai Shavim says that in Gemara Sukkah, and it's a good question. Why doesn't it mention? Well, I have to look up the Gemara there. The Gemara in Sukkah mentioned what you're saying is a Gemara in Sukkah on, and we should take a look maybe over there. So we don't have much time left. I'm going to try to look up what the context is, because if over there the context is that it's only the esrog tree, then you have a good question.
why doesn't it also
Rabbi?
mention the pilpulin? Now, I should also mention that here, what is the reason? Why would we think that a pilpulin tree is not included in the laws of Orla? Why shouldn't it be? What's wrong with a pilpulin tree that it's not included? And there are different opinions. One opinion is that the reason why you might think differently is because the reason you would think it's not included, again, it is included in the laws of Orla, but you might think it's not included is because the pilpulin, two things. One is pilpulin become dried out afterwards. Therefore, maybe you wouldn't call it a fruit tree because they don't really, once they get dried out, they're inedible. And the other thing is that it's very low, such a low bush that it wouldn't, that the question is maybe it wouldn't be considered a tree, be more considered like a vegetable, similar, at least because it's so low. So these are the two reasons why one might be considerate that it's not a fruit tree. So therefore our Gemara has to add it. Now again, so Isaac, we'll have to look at that Gemara there and see if maybe it does mention pilpulin over there. I have to look at the Gemara over there. It's Gemara in Sukkah. So we'll take a look. Yes, Phyllis.
Yes, I'm put in mind of cinnamon, which has
we're going to talk about
not only
cinnamon.
a medicinal purpose.
Yeah, we're going to talk about cinnamon.
Bark.
Phyllis.
It's the bark, and when Isaac was talking about the tree, it reminded me of the cinnamon because that's the bark.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it soon. About cinnamon soon. I mean, and soon in this discussion over here, not today. But it is, Teves does bring down the cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves. Teves goes into a number of different interesting questions of the bracha. Okay, but in the meantime,
Rabbi,
yes,
just a quick question regarding the reasons for no bracha on peppers because they're used as a condiment and they're not normally eaten, et cetera. Isn't that the same? It should be the same thing regarding salt. And a few days ago, you said that we do say a bracha on salt. Salt is also not normally eaten, and it's used as a condiment, as a seasoning. So why would salt be different than pepper? One's grown and one's not grown, but I'm not sure.
So let me tell you, salt, if you eat a lot of sugar, like cake, and you like stuff yourself, so people like to have something salty afterwards. Nowadays, people pull out the potato chips and the all different types of salty things. In the olden days, they didn't have all Pashkas and Liebers and all these other Wise and all the other potato chips and companies and all these Nash companies and popcorns. And so they used to take salt and eat it. It wasn't every day, but it was something that people would do. They would, you wanted something a little salty. Now you take out the olives, maybe the olives, the pickles or something. But in the olden days, they would eat salt once in a while, not a lot, but a small little amount. And so maybe you probably never stuffed yourself with sugar, but basically that's the. It seems like salt would be in the olden days. They would eat a little salt if they, in that scenario. So somehow salt was eaten a little. Now, pepper wasn't. I'm just throwing. It's my own thought, actually. I can't say I saw that somewhere, but I'm guessing that was my understanding when we read that people eat salt. It seemed to me like they were in the mood of what we would eat for potato chips. They wanted something salty in their mouth. They would put a little salt in their mouth. Okay, so in any event, we've mentioned about the pilpuli, this pepper corns, the question of the bracha on it, and either shahakal or no bracha. We mentioned that on Yom Kippur, person who ate this peppercorn would be exempt, and the same thing would be ginger. And now we mentioned a contradictory brisa, a brisa that contradicts seems to contradict these statements, and it tells us that peppercorn is called a fruit tree. And it also mentions the Gemara continues this brisa, and it says Lamedcha teaches us she'ein Eretz Yisrael chaser klum, that Israel, the laws of Arla, the biblical laws of Arla apply in Israel, right? And we said that outside of Israel, you also keep Arla, but it's rabbinic. So if the Torah tells us the laws of Arla, and it tells you you gotta keep Arla for pilpulin, for peppercorns, what does that mean? That in Israel, peppercorns grow. So it teaches us that Israel isn't missing anything. Even peppercorns you have in Israel. Ein Eretz Yisrael chaser klum. There's nothing missing in Israel. Shenemar, as it says, Eretz asher loy b'miskenus toichal bo lechem. A land that it doesn't have miskenus, like poverty. It's not missing anything. You will eat your bread with everything, with abundance. And loisechsar kolba, you will not miss anything there in Israel. And so even peppercorns are available in Israel. And what comes out from this is that peppercorns are an edible fruit of a fruit tree. So why did we say that you either do not recite a bracha or you recite a shahakol? So like kasha, it's not a question, the Gemara says. Haber yabeshta. If they're fresh, if they're ripe, they're fresh. Tivta, they're fresh. Yabeshta means dry. If they're fresh, then it's a tree, it's a fruit tree, and it's edible, and so on. If it's yabeshta, if they're dry, that would be a case of that it's not edible. So only things that are only these items, when they're fresh, they're edible, and when they're dry, that's when it's not really. So when is it obligated in Arla? That's when it's fresh, and that would be the time. Now that would be when you would eat it. But after they're dried, so there you have this argument. It's either considered a change in the fruit, and therefore, it's not the norm for people to eat it. You say shahakol, or you don't say any bracha at all, because it's really a spice. It's not meant to be a food. And that, I think, will conclude here. This is the answer that the Gemara gives to when is it considered a fruit tree and when is it not considered edible. It depends if it's fresh or if it's dry. Yes, Susan.
Now it makes sense. Now It totally makes sense to me. Now I understand what you were talking about before. I could not understand it until you just read the end of it. Now it all falls into place.
Okay, great. Okay, everyone, have a wonderful day. Sei gesund. We'll see you later. Mirz Hashem. We have a guest speaker today.